Part 6. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 51. Toulouse took Tangwan upstairs, and the old stairs made a creaking sound like those in ghost stories, where ghosts live in haunted houses. Toulouse deliberately lowered his head and looked at Tangwan, who was being held by him. You know, this kind of place can easily scare children. I still remember that when my brother came to this castle for the first time, he was so frightened that he cried. The next day, I got on a private plane and returned to Germany, vowing never to come back again. But this little kid just held his hand, neither crying nor fussing, but his movements up the stairs were a little clumsy. The onesie is cute, but it's a little inconvenient to move around. Toulouse couldn't stand it, so he picked up Tangwan and muttered, Lin Zhen doesn't know how to raise cubs, how can he wear such clothes? Tangwan understood. Toulouse despises his brother. She sniffed, stretched out her hand to cover Toulouse's mouth, and shouted ah. Toulouse raised his eyebrows, opened his mouth, and took a bite of Tangwan's hand. Then I saw an expression of surprise on Tangwan's usually expressionless face. This big brother, he eats his hand. While Toulouse opened his mouth, Tangwan quickly took his hand back, wiped it with his clothes, then turned his back and faced Toulouse with his butt. Toulouse ruffled Tangwan's hair and said with a smile, it's quite protective. Then he took Tangwan up to the second floor and opened a gorgeous door. The heavy sound of the door opening was like the sound of the orphanage door opening once heard in Tangwan. She glanced at the door curiously, then opened her mouth slightly because of the decoration of the room, and her eyes were a little surprised. This room is like a princess's bedroom, filled with countless gorgeous dresses. There are jewels on it that Tangwan has never seen before, which are paler than the words she can accumulate in her young age. They are good looking. They don't have a trace of dust and are well protected. However, Toulouse picked up one of the pieces, put it on Tangwan's body, made some gestures back and forth, and then said, Schatz, treasure, sweetheart German, you are suitable for this piece. It was a light blue skirt, and the skirt swayed like ocean waves. With Toulouse's movements, it looked more like rolling waves. And it's the only dress with sleeves. It is beautiful, and it is something that any child with a princess dream cannot refuse. However, Tangwan shook his head and rejected Toulouse. All gifts given by fate have their prices secretly marked. Tangwan didn't know what price she had to pay to wear this skirt. But she should be inappropriate now. Seeing Tangwan's indifferent expression, Toulouse couldn't help but said, what's so good about his panda suit? You like it so much. Tangwan didn't say anything, just turned his head and ignored him. Although the panda suit is indeed not as expensive as those luxurious dresses in terms of world currency. But it truly belongs to you. It is a real reality, not an unattainable and imaginary dream. What she wants is never an empty wish, but a reality that is within reach and can be explored underfoot. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door, a little urgent, and it sounded like the person who came could not bear it any longer. Toulouse looked a little awkward, stretched out his hand to pick his ears, said something unhappy in German, and then walked downstairs with Tangwan in his arms. As he walked, he did not forget to say to Tangwan, tell Lin that you are enjoying your stay with me, and I will take you to my manor. There are many beautiful little skirts over there, which are much prettier than these plush clothes. Tangwan nodded casually, then stretched out his panda paw, patted Toulouse's arm, pointed in the direction of the door, and shouted anxiously, ah. Toulouse hissed unhappily and replied in unskilled Chinese, you heartless little brat. Tangwan shook his head, and the panda ears on his head swayed happily, looking particularly cute. It's just that no matter how cute she is, she can't make Toulouse happy. On the contrary, Toulouse was even more aggrieved. How am I worse than that Lulin? He obviously knows more children than Lulin. However, Tangwan didn't know what Toulouse was thinking. He just thought that he was about to see his brother, and he couldn't wait. It must be brother Lulin. Only he will find you in the first time. Tang Wan waited happily for Toulouse to open the door. The moment Toulouse opened the door, a fist as big as a sandbag hit Toulouse. Toulouse accidentally received a solid punch. However, he hugged Tang Wan subconsciously and did not let Tang Wan get hurt because he was attacked. As soon as he opened the door, Tang Wan saw Lulin standing outside the door. He pursed his lips, stretched out his hand, grabbed Tang Wan's hat, and then tried to Tang Wan away from Toulouse's hands like he was pulling a carrot. Return. However, Toulouse grabbed Tang Wan tightly and kept saying, Lin. Let's discuss it. I'll give you my brat to raise, so give me this little sweetheart. Upon hearing this, Lulin raised his foot and kicked Toulouse on the calf. Hearing a sound of ouch, Toulouse let go of his hand. Lulin hugged Tang Wan in his arms, covered her little face tightly and pressed her to him, then stretched out his hand to cover Tang Wan's ears and yelled at Toulouse. Don't fart. That brat of yours is no better than Tang Tang, go back. As soon as Toulouse heard what Lulin said, he knew that there was no chance of robbing the doll. He looked at Tang Wan with some regret, and said without giving up, you really can't lend Tang Wan to me to raise. I'm better at raising a cub than you. Lulin did not hesitate to tear apart Toulouse's disguise and asked, oh? Based on your experience of raising something to death, I suspect that your brother is not close to you because you fed him some weird things when you were a child. Toulouse touched the tip of his nose and did not refute. Lulin did not forget that he and Tang Wan were still recording the show. He snatched Tang Wan back and prepared to leave. However, at this moment, Toulouse suddenly said to Tang Wan, ask Lin to take you to my house to play when you have time. My home has the sea, which is very beautiful. Tang Wan just wanted to raise his head, but Lulin pushed it down again. She heard Lulin say angrily, if she wants to see the sea, I can take her there. You can cool off for me and stay there. Toulouse pursed his lips and said nothing more. Just watching Tang Wan leave, he suddenly seemed to remember something, took out his mobile phone and made a cross-country call. Finally, a slightly evil smile appeared on his lips, he hung up the phone, put down his cell phone, hummed a tune, and returned to the kitchen to start cleaning up the mess. On the other side, Tang Wan was held by Lulin and faced the wind and snow back to the small house. There was no one else around except the angry Lulin. Lulin patted the melted snow on Tang Wan's body and said angrily, you just left with him? You weren't afraid that he was a bad person? He thought Tang Wan would shake his head, but he didn't expect Tang Wan to suddenly hug him. Just when Lulin was about to say something, he felt the little kid in front of him trembling. Then I heard a small ah. It seems to be saying, afraid. Note, all gifts given by fate have their prices secretly marked. From The Beheaded Queen by Stephen Zweig. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 52. Lulin stretched out his hand, hugged Tang Wan, and said angrily, I knew I was afraid, but I still let him take you away. Tang Wan lowered his head and was speechless. She just thought that if Lu Ziyi and Go 11 returned safely, someone would tell Lulin that she was taken away by his friends. Standing there all the time, not only is it difficult to take pictures, but also people will recognize him. If people who knew Lulin and others knew about it, it might become a joke in their mouths. The relationship between Lulin and Toulouse turned out to be bad, and they had a tantrum on the show just because of a few brats. No matter how this topic is combined, it is weird enough to attract curious eyes. Tang Wan understands that feeling all too well. Just like she once wanted to tell others about the grievances she suffered, but could only get one sentence. Look at the way you are fussing over everything now, it's really ugly. Others don't care about the person's feelings, they only care about the moment when they lose control of their emotions. Others don't care what things are like originally. The knife will not hurt unless it is cut on oneself. Tang Wan was just protecting Lu Lin in his own way. She enjoyed it as if it were glutinous rice. There is no need to tell Lu Lin these words. She hugged Lu Lin tightly, as if she was being coquettish. Lu Lin touched Tang Wan's head, feeling that no matter how angry he was, it disappeared. Although he could not accurately guess what Tang Wan was thinking, he could guess Tang Wan's thoughts based on the logic of Tang Wan's actions. Maybe it's because I don't want my personal relationship to be exposed. So he followed Toulouse away obediently and without any struggle. She knew that Toulouse would not harm her, even though Toulouse was a stranger to her. It's just that Tang Wan trusted Lu Lin. Tang Wan is an extreme altruist with extreme dedication. When making any choice, he subconsciously chooses to sacrifice himself. After thinking about this, Lu Lin felt that his throat was a little dry. In the end, everything he had could only be reduced to one sentence, as long as it's okay. Hearing the slightly hoarse voice, Tang Wan quickly raised his head, his eyes as bright as grapes filled with worry. Like asking, "What happened to you?" However, Lu Lin just rubbed Tang Wan's head with a complicated mood, and then said, "I would be worried. I will be worried, so can I take care of myself in the future?" He seemed to be saying this. Tang Wan blinked in confusion. Worry? Worry about what? Are you worried about yourself? Do you have anything to worry about? I am just a little monster who has been abandoned, disliked by others, and cannot speak. However, the person hugging him spoke with a pity tone and his own actions over and over again. I am a treasure. It is a cherished child. Lu Lin will worry about himself. He said this. Tang Wan wanted to smile. He wanted to wave his hand like usual and tell Lu Lin that he would not do it next time. But she didn't want to raise her hand now. She just felt a little attached to this embrace. It was really too cold in winter, and she really wanted to have a warm home. Even if it's just for a moment, she wants to have it. As night fell, Lu Lin took Tang Wan to finish their meal, freshen up, and then walked into her private den. He put the doll one-piece suit prepared for Tang Wan next to the pillow. When he turned around, he saw Tang Wan standing behind him, looking at the mini bear on the bedside. Looks like she likes it very much. Lu Lin smiled and felt that he was simply a genius. Toulouse is the idiot who doesn't know what Tang Wan likes. What little girl just likes beautiful dresses? It's simply unreasonable. Tang Tang obviously likes doll bears. Of course, it's not impossible if Tang Tang likes skirts. He can afford it anyway. As Lu Lin was thinking, he picked up the doll on the bedside, shook it in front of Tang Wan, and asked, "Do you like it?" Tang Wan felt that the little black bear was somewhat familiar. She subconsciously reached out her hand and took the little black bear. She always felt that she had seen this little bear somewhere. She likes this little bear. Nodded, then stood on tiptoes and imitated Sujiajia's coquettish behavior towards Dean Su, and pulled Lu Lin's sleeves. Lu Lin squatted down without knowing why. Still saying this, "What's the matter?" Then the next second, a soft lips pressed against the side of Lu Lin's face. There is still Tang Wan's milky voice saying in my ears, "Ah ah." Lu Lin. Lu Lin felt that he must have been drunk. Otherwise, how could I dream that Tang Wan, who was so reserved, would take the initiative to stick with me? But the character of brother Lu Lin cannot be destroyed. He coughed twice and said to Tang Wan sincerely, "Tang Tang can't do this to outsiders. This is an action to do to your family, you know. Of course, that brat Lu Zi can't do it either. He's not good, so don't get along with him. Go 11, go 11, go 11 is barely okay, she is a little girl. Fu Wenzi, Chen Shuo are not good at these, they are outsiders. Grandmas can do it." Tang Wan nodded every time Lu Lin said something, acting so well behaved. Lu Lin waited until her mouth was dry after talking, Then she stuffed the soft and fragrant Tangwan into the quilt, then turned on the night light for her, and said with a smile, "Good night, Tang Tang." Tangwan looked at the slowly closing door and muttered silently in his heart, "Good night, brother." She held the little black bear in her hand and had a dream. In the dream, she appeared in a small room, and a woman was cooking in the kitchen. Tangwan turned around and saw the bear doll in his hand. However, this bear doll was much larger than Tangwan remembered. It is as big as Tangwan. She opened her mouth, trying to make a sound, trying to attract the kitchen woman's attention. "Mom, Mom, Mom." Tangwan opened his eyes suddenly. She sat up from the bed, reached out and touched her throat, imitating the feeling of speaking in her dream, and spoke. "Ah, ah, ah, ah." Tangwan is too anxious. She didn't know if it was her own memory. She couldn't see the woman's face and couldn't remember her appearance clearly. But the appearance of the house in the dream made her feel so at ease. Made her feel a strange sense of peace of mind. "Ah, ah." Tangwan became more and more anxious, and even reached out and patted his own throat. "Why? Why can't you speak? Why can't I speak? Mommy, mommy. Mom, where are you?" Hearing Tangwan's voice, Lulin immediately stood up from the next door, opened the door suddenly, and saw Tangwan slapping his throat. He took Tangwan's hand and said in a rare and ferocious voice, "What are you doing?" Tangwan didn't struggle at all. Just looked at Lulin quietly, and then tears fell down all of a sudden. She missed her mother. But she couldn't remember what her mother looked like. Thanks to Zixia Mumwiu and the 2 treasures for the reward. Today is also the day when I want to be the king of the sea. Thanks to Winnie21 Bayazai for his monthly ticket. Love you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 53. Chapter 53. Brother, wait until I come back to save you. Lulin saw that Tangwan was crying, so he quickly picked up a tissue from the small table next to him and wiped Tangwan's wet eyes. What's wrong? Lulin suppressed the anger in his heart and looked at the little boy who was crying. His tone was not as fierce as before. In the final analysis, he was also afraid that Tangwan would hurt him. He could feel that something was wrong with Tangwan's mental state. There is an unreal feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering on the edge. But she is obviously still so young. She has never seen flowers bloom, so why is she so sad? Tangwan finally looked a little cheerful these days, but a dream made her shrink back into her stubborn turtle shell. Children are very forgetful, let alone dreams. Not long after, Tangwan's tears stopped. She blinked her eyes and squeezed the last tears out of her eyes. Subconsciously, he wanted to answer Lulin's question just now, but after thinking about it again and again, he couldn't remember what he had just dreamed about. Just feel sad. It's so sad. She couldn't hold back her tears. Lulin saw that Tangwan had calmed down and asked quickly, "What's wrong? You're crying so sadly." Tangwan shook her head. There was only a vague shadow in her memory. She couldn't remember why she was crying. Lulin saw Tangwan shaking his head and did not continue to ask. He just patted the plush clothes on Tangwan's bedside, stood up and walked out. "Get dressed quickly, they will be here soon." Tangwan nodded and rubbed his face with his 2 fleshy hands. Lulin closed the door, walked away a little, clicked on his phone, and read the message Grandma Lu sent to him. It says, "The most beautiful lady in Luda, there is something wrong with the orphanage where Tang Tang is staying. Your Aunt Si has asked someone to check it out. You should be prepared. The most beautiful beauty in mainland China. I remember that Dean Su's daughter was also on the show." Children are innocent. Remember to take care of them, lest some news breaks out and frightens the child. Lulin took out a mint candy from his trouser pocket and put it in his mouth. The cold feeling suddenly dispelled his sleepiness, as if he had surfed his brain with the ultimate ice cubes on top. He took a bite of the mint with his teeth, then reached out his hand in disgust and replied. Lulin, got it? Lulin, please ask me about Tang Tang's mother then. Lulin just said the sentence, then frowned and withdrew it. Tisk, he pursed his lips and felt depressed in his heart. What kind of person would abandon his own child? But he thought of Tang Wan's name again, and felt that Tang Wan might not be abandoned. While Lulin was still thinking, the door behind him suddenly opened. A huge rabbit is jumping out of the room. However, because he still needed to work on the show, the rabbit clothes Lulin chose for Tang Wan were dark gray. Very resistant to stains. Tang Wan raised her head, and the lop-eared bunny ears on her head changed with her movements. A pair of clear eyes, when looking at people, seemed to be able to directly penetrate the soul. Lulin didn't want to dwell on these unresolved matters, so he bent down and touched Tang Wan's head. I made up my mind that Tang Wan is already a family member no matter what. She wanted to know her past, so he helped Tang Wan find it. If she didn't want to, she would accompany Tang Wan to create her future. She is still young and has a long future. Tang Wan didn't know what Lulin was thinking about in this short period of time, but he was led by Lulin and walked to the door obediently. However, this time, only Tang Wan and Lulin were left on the vast flat ground. Lulin looked at Ping Ping, who was standing a little uneasily in front of him, with a cold smile on his lips, and asked, "What are you doing?" The viewers in the live broadcast room saw Lulin's stinky face and left messages one after another. Come, I'm in the front row, our brother Lin's stinky face is late but he's here. I thought that the fact that he didn't have a bad face when he went to find Tang Tang meant that he had recovered from his anger when he got up, but I didn't expect that he was just being rude to people. Point. Double standards. But it's really comfortable to bring Tang Tang's perspective. Woo woo, brother Lin cares about me, he has me in his heart. Look at my fist, will you wake up after one punch? Okay, wake up, please ask the great sage to accept your magical powers. The barrage in the morning has always been the most harmonious, without any sharp contradictions. The atmosphere is very harmonious. Ping Ping's eyes were a little uncertain, and she even took a step back without any trace. Then he said with a smile, ha, today we have a new pair of brothers, so as the most popular group in our show, we have to take the lead. Lulin's eyebrows narrowed, and he had a somewhat unpleasant look in his heart. Could it be that what you said is? However, before Lulin finished speaking, Ping Ping took out a simple map, stuffed it into Tang Wan's hand, and said quickly, Tang Tang must be looking forward to the new kid, right? As she spoke, she winked at Tang Wan. Although Tang Wan didn't understand why Sister Ping Ping's eyes seemed to be cramped, she still nodded empathetically. Then take the map and open it. Several locations were marked with a pencil on it, and the word supplies was written on it, and then. What are you doing? Let me go. Two hunters wearing sunglasses and animal skins appeared from behind Ping Ping. One of them took one of Lulin's arms and carried him away. Even Tang Wan, who was in a relatively stable mood, couldn't help but look at his brother with his mouth covered in surprise. Ah! Is it such a big deal? You are finished. When brother Lin is free, he will definitely blow your heads off. The dog head emoticon package saves life. This program team is not good. They have kidnapped my brother Lin for the second time. Doesn't he have no face? Siha, brother Lin's waist is really beautiful. Fork out. This is a baby girl. Ping Ping wiped the non-existent sweat on her head, pointed to the places circled in blue on the map, and said warmly, these locations are where your companions are trapped, and you also need to rescue them. Having said this, Ping Ping looked at the serious little rabbit in front of her and said jokingly, "Rabbit warrior, will you accept the mission of saving your friends and come back with supplies to entertain our new friends?" Tang Wan nodded seriously, stretched out his rabbit paw, pulled the lobe on his head, and then stepped out with his short legs. Set off. Just before leaving, she couldn't help but turn around and look in the direction where Lu Lin was taken away. She took out a tablet from the front pocket of the doll suit and wrote on it, "Elder brother, wait until I come back to save you." The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 54. Tang Wan is a smart child. Even though the map in her hand is very abstract, she can still understand it. The sun above his head is not too hot, but Tang Wan has been suffering from malnutrition for a long time and would be out of breath after walking for a long time. She stopped, took out a bottle of yogurt from the pocket on her belly, unscrewed the lid, and did not drink it immediately. She glanced at the camera and then at the yogurt. Leaves the audience a little confused. What is Tang Tang doing? Just drink if you want, why are you still looking at the camera? What else can I do? Probably because I'm looking for a lens. Let me put it bluntly, this dumb kid only knows how to play tricks and is not lovable at all. Yesterday, Gia was fishing alone, and there were no shots at all. She was good, she easily hugged Lu Lin's thigh, and got the most popular combination. It's just good luck. Which kid here is not better than her or cuter than her? What's that thing upstairs? Don't you know these votes are cast separately? They are all voted by everyone one by one, not just one vote to form a group. Yes, when you say this, it seems like you haven't read the rules carefully. I'm serious, it's not easy for a fat director to earn money. You'd better refund the order to your party. You can't guess what the fat director will do, how to initiate a vote and how to arrange the plot. Yes, although the fat director likes to whet his appetite and engage in some unexpected activities, I have to say that the fat director is fairly fair. Ha ha ha, after all, the fat guide is not short of money, he is the capital itself. The fat guide, who was observing the trends on the internet, looked at the barrage in front of him and touched his hat with some guilt. Ah, he is not that rich either. As for why Sujiajia's video wasn't broadcast live yesterday, it's not because it couldn't be broadcast. I don't know what the kid was thinking, but he insisted on borrowing tools from the man named Toulouse next to him. Let's just borrow it. He also talks badly and is very arrogant. Toulouse was of course not a person who could swallow his anger, so he retorted directly, and then Sujiajia cried. I was crying so hard that I looked at the photographer with a hint of unexplainable meaning. Of course these clips cannot be broadcast. Won't the broadcast make Sujiajia's already not very good reputation even worse? Faith Deo has a wide body and a fat body. He doesn't take Sujiajia's little actions to heart, and he doesn't want to add bad negative news to her. He looked at the barrage and passed by. Over at Tang Wan, she took out a bottle of mineral water from her pocket and handed it to the camera. Muttered ah in his mouth. The barrages in the live broadcast room first stopped for a while, and then popped up again. I just said Tang Tang is not such a brat. Please apologize to Tang Tang. What's there to apologize for? Didn't she keep the yogurt for herself and not give it to the photographer? That bottle of yogurt was given to her by Lu Lin. She would never give anything to anyone else. Don't go too far. I am so angry, I'm really angry. From the beginning, your accounts have been full of malice towards Tang Tang. I'm going to report you one by one. Plus I am the only one. I want to report you too. My good baby has been turned into such a mess by you. Tang Tang doesn't have so many bad intentions in the first place. Tang Wan didn't know that Dan Mu was quarreling with him. She also wanted to complete her mission quickly and then go back to save her brother. She moved on, hopping like a gray rabbit. Finally she walked to the nearest villa, outside the first villa. It is the room of the Fu family and his son. Tang Wan did not go in immediately. Instead, he took a look around and found some strange traces. Looks like someone is haunted. Obviously, Fu Wenzi's father, like his brother, was captured by the show crew. Tang Wan walked to the door and knocked on the door. With a ding sound, the door opened from the inside, and a childish and indifferent face appeared in front of everyone. But when Fu Wenzi in front of him saw Tang Wan, he was obviously stunned for a moment, and then asked, "What's the matter?" Seeing his nonchalant look, Tang Wan suspected for a moment that the information he had collected outside was not true. But she did not forget her purpose and directly raised her hand to communicate with Fu Wenzi in sign language. Tang Wan's speed was a bit fast, and he felt a little anxious. But Fu Wenzi was not as unable to analyze Tang Wan's meaning as when he first met Tang Wan. He nodded vigorously without any hesitation, remained silent for a moment, slightly opened his thin lips, and said in a rare doubtful tone, "Won't he come back on his own?" What a father saying goodbye and a son roaring. It is indeed like a father resigning and a son roaring, a filial son, ha ha ha. Tang Tang, your father was captured by bad guys, let's go rescue him. Zhizzy, won't he come back on his own? It won't be cured even if you give me candy. Tang Wan was stunned for a while, not knowing what to say. She was not good at words to begin with, and now she was even more embarrassed. Finally, Tang Wan stretched out his hand, made a series of sign language, and said, "But some people will never come back if they leave, we have to find them." When he said this, the lop ear behind Tang Wan seemed even more listless and looked pitiful. Fu Wenzi sighed, pulled Tang Wan and walked into the house. He took out a pair of gloves from the room, and took out 2 pieces of bread from the microwave, pinched Tang Wan's rabbit ears, and his tone was less cold and more gentle, "Let's go." The audience in the live broadcast room mercilessly exposed Master Fu's disguise. "Easily, I used the dozens of yuan I earned yesterday to buy gloves for Tang Tang, and put the bread in the microwave to heat up early, saying that I was waiting for Father Fu to come back, but in fact I was just waiting for the rabbit to come back. I just saw Zhizzy stretching out his hand to pinch Tang Tang's bunny ears. He stretched them out, then pulled them back, and finally pinched them. The corners of his mouth turned up a little. He is actually a plush man." Tang Wan was not in good health and was a little tired after walking so far, but she kept her spirits up and did not show weakness. But Fu Wenzi, who was following her, noticed that Tang Wan was unwell and slowed down, allowing Tang Wan to keep up easily. There is some thin snow on the ground, just dotting some wet roads. Frost hangs on the branches, and the melted snow turns into water droplets. Each drop falls on the ground, making a vague ding sound. The cameraman followed behind them, placing a gray figure and a black figure in the frame, like a painting or a poem. It is obviously silent and full of emotion. The sun rises quietly, dyeing the distant mountain tops with golden glory. This picture, full of life and vitality, silenced the quarreling live broadcast room. Seems like I am walking with them. Thanks to Silang, Shiyo 20210301105365153134, Ko Duo, and Shiyo 201904291112204747, for their monthly votes. Thank you all for your support. I successfully advanced to PK4, but the number of words is not enough. Be generous and love you. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 55. The movements of the 2 cubs were not fast, even a little slow. But the cameraman didn't rush them. After all, this is quite slippery, and it would be bad if you fall. Besides, the atmosphere between them is warm enough. Fu Wenzi has been following Tang Wan, like a little knight, very attentive. Of course, no matter how slow they moved, they still reached the hut where Go 11 lived. Actually, Everyone's residence is not very far away, you just need to follow the serial numbers on the map. Go 11 and Go Yun's houses are not so good. Their houses are mud houses. The floor was quite clean and not dirty, but when you opened the door and walked in, you could hear the door creaking. Looks like it's a bit old. Go 11, who heard the sound, ran out with a black fried egg in his mouth. Hair is still a little crooked. Apparently, Go Yun had not combed Go 11's hair when he was taken away. The moment Go 11 saw Tang Wan, she was stunned. She opened her mouth and the fried egg in her mouth fell. Then she stretched out her hand and pulled her messy hair a few times. However, her hands-on ability was really poor. She looked very busy, but she didn't know what she was doing. In the end, Tang Wan stepped forward, took Go 11's hand, and asked her to stop pulling out her hair. The little boy's hair is already thin and soft. Go 11's rough movements caused several strands of her hair to fall out. Fu Wenzi had already brought Tang Wan a small bench for her and Go 11 to sit on. He also found a plastic comb and handed it to Tang Wan. Finally, he walked to the side and waited quietly for Tang Wan and Go 11 to comb their hair. Go 11 blinked and watched Fu Wenzi find the comb from the dark room like a magic trick, still a little unbelievable. No. The comb that she and her father had been looking for a long time but couldn't find, why did it suddenly appear in Fu Wenzi's hand? Her eyes were wide open and she was so shocked that it was so funny that the audience who had been watching Go 11's live broadcast room laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha, Zixie's expression is so funny. Zixie. Are you trying to laugh me to death so you can inherit my bank card? Zixie and Dog Dad had been looking for a comb that they hadn't found for a long time. When it appeared in Zixie's hand, she felt bad. Dog Dad. Ha ha ha, what an image. But Zixie is such a gentleman, he prepared these silently, and then walked aside to wait for them quietly. My mood is really stable, and I am more reliable than many adults. Stop talking, which kid here is not more reliable than the average adult? Perhaps young Master Lu is not that reliable? Master Lu, are you polite? Oh, young Master Lu just doesn't look very smart at ordinary times. In fact, when he is not stupid, he is still very smart. Tang Wan's movements were very gentle. She combed Go 11's tangled hair bit by bit, and then took out a rubber band from the pocket in front of her. There is a very simple decoration on it, which is a sunflower. Very suitable for Go 11. But Tang Wan was a little reluctant to part with it. This is what Lu Lin gave her. But for a while, Go 11's hair tie could not be found, so Tang Wan could only use her own to tie it up for Go 11. Go 11 stood up, shook the ponytail on her head, and jumped up and grabbed Tang Wan's hand. Her voice was particularly excited and a little surprising. It turns out that combing your hair can be painless. Seeing how happy she was, Tang Wan turned his attention away from her headband and nodded. Brushing your hair is inherently painless. Our baby Zixie finally knows that combing her hair is painless. God knows how she is treated every day. That's right, the way that Dog Dad combs his hair is simply poisonous. Extremely cruel, afraid that the hair will not fall out. I am very worried about baby Zixie's hairline in the future. Same worry ad 1. But fortunately they didn't stay here for long and headed towards Lu Ziyi's home. Go 11 was by Tang Wan's side all the way, and the colors on her clothes were particularly bright, making Tang Wan, the gray rabbit, even more colorful. Go 11 also ran to her room, took out a few flower clips from her skull bag, and clipped them on Tang Wan's rabbit ears. Suddenly, the rabbit became more bright. But there were still knowledgeable people in the live broadcast room, and they could tell at a glance what the hairpin Go 11 took out was. WC. Is that a Prada hairpin? There are so many colors, one rabbit ear of Tang Tang is worth 1 W. Ha! Why is that hairpin so expensive? His truly, I'm going to make myself laugh. But the child does not know the value of this hairpin. Or maybe, they know, but don't care. Compared with the price of the hairpin, perhaps Go11 felt the need to embellish Tangwan's bland rabbit ears. Price is just their added value. The hair tie that Tangwan put on Go11 was equal to the hairpin at this moment. They are the same. The three cubs continued to set off, but Sujiajia had been waiting in the room for a long time. She wants to make sure that she is eye-catching every time she appears. So the clothes she wears are all affordable but extremely beautiful. Choose affordable clothes to prevent others from finding out that Sue's mother is rich. The purpose of knowing how to match things is to get rid of the unpleasant nickname I had in my previous life, the title of Bumpkin. Sujiajia still remembers that in her previous life, Go11's outfits were all specially matched by someone, and she could easily get thousands of hairpins. Standing next to her, he looked like an ugly duckling. But fortunately, although Lulin didn't like herself, she was not allowed to attack her online, so she bought herself an expensive hairpin that day. The moment she put on the hairpin, Sujiajia really felt like a princess. Thinking of this, a blush appeared on Sujiajia's face. Who hasn't dreamed of being liked by a prince for a few years? She has always had thoughts about Lulin. It's a pity that when Lulin realized what he was thinking in his last life, he went abroad without giving himself a chance. If I can build a good relationship with Tangwan in this life, will there be many more opportunities to get along with Lulin? Then is there any chance that he will fall in love with me? Just when Sujiajia was having a sweet dream in her heart, Tangwan also walked to the door of her house. The environment here is much better than the small house where Go11 lives, at least it looks like a house. Before Tangwan had time to knock on the door, Sujiajia, who was in the room, ran over to her. Her clothes were neat and her hair was styled. She had just the right amount of expectation on her face. She grabbed Tangwan's hand and said, "You're finally here, I've been waiting for you for a long time. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 56. Tangwan was not used to being held by someone so affectionately. What's more, she was still restless deep in her heart, reminding herself to stay away from Sujiajia. When Sujiajia saw the hairpins on Tangwan's rabbit ears, her pupils shrank, the strength in her hands subconsciously increased, and her expression became a little distorted. That card must have been given to Tangwan by Go11. She just gave away such expensive things so casually. When she wore it on her head in her last life, she never thought about giving it to herself. Why are everyone surrounding Tangwan? Is this Tangwan really that good? Although the malice in Sujiajia's heart was about to solidify, she did not forget that she was still live broadcasting, so she quickly lowered her head to hide the jealousy on her face. When she raised her head again, she looked lively and cheerful again. Tangwan, who was hiding under the rabbit hat, turned pale instantly because of the pain. She subconsciously wanted to take her hand back, but Sujiajia pulled her even tighter. Go11 saw Sujiajia grabbing Tangwan's wrist, frowned, and said, "What do you mean by this? Do you think we are slow to arrive?" She reacted quickly. Although she hadn't thought about what was wrong with Sujiajia's words, she had already subconsciously started to refute Sujiajia. For some reason, Go11 just felt that Sujiajia's words were particularly harsh sometimes, even if she said them with a smile. Sujiajia was about to say that she didn't mean it, when she reached out a hand from the side and grabbed Tangwan, pulling her away from Tangwan. "It is Fu Wenzi." He looked at Sujiajia coldly, protected Tangwan behind him, and then said, "We didn't delay on the way, we came here according to the order on the map." As he spoke, Fu Wenzi lowered his head and glanced at the child's watch, It took us 30 minutes in total from Tang Tang to here. The journey is more than 1,500 meters, so I took the time to have breakfast on the way. You can't say that about us. Fu Wenzi always uses data as support for his answers, so he seems particularly convincing. Except for the fact that he concealed the fact that Tang Wan was walking slowly because of poor health, everything else was true. But it doesn't matter, it's just an irrelevant question. Every time he said a word, the smile on Sujiajia's face would become stiffer. Until the last word was spoken, Sujiajia's expression could no longer be maintained. Sujiajia never thought that the young master of the Fu family, who had always been looked down upon by everyone in his previous life, would be so nosy this time. Obviously he didn't speak much in his last life, so why is he suddenly so proactive in this life? It's really annoying. Sujiajia is thinking this in her heart, but she won't show it on the outside. She raised her hand, touched the tip of her nose as if to cover it up, then looked at Tang Wan and said, "I'm sorry, I'm used to it. I say whatever I like, and I don't mean to blame you. It's just that I've been waiting for a long time, and I can't wait a little bit." As she spoke, she blinked in Tang Wan's direction, looking very sincere. "Wan won't blame me, right?" Tang Wan looked at those eyes and felt a strange emotion. Very strange. She was obviously smiling, but why did the emotion in her eyes look like she was about to kill herself? Tang Wan didn't like to add extraneous details, nor did she like to delay everyone because of herself, so she shook her head and dismissed the matter. Just rubbing the two rabbit paws back and forth, it seems that this can make the pain in the wrist disappear. Fu Wenzi did not miss Tang Wan's movements, but the education he received since childhood told him that he should not lift up a woman's clothes at will, even if she was wearing a cute doll costume. This is impolite and undesirable. So he walked beside Tang Wan and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong with the hand?" His voice was so low that only Tang Wan could hear it. Tang Wan just pursed his lips and shook his head. Sujiajia must have been careless, and she was not in much pain. Just forget it. It was just an accident. Fu Wenzi saw Tang Wan shaking his head, but he was not relieved either. During the next journey, he intentionally or unintentionally separated Tang Wan and Sujiajia. "I always feel that Tang Wan has been bullied." Sujiajia wanted to go to Tang Wan and have a good relationship with her several times, but she was pushed away by Go 11 and Fu Wenzi. Tang Wan didn't notice their little movements and walked on his own. "It's still a bit urgent." Tang Wan wanted to see Lu Lin as soon as possible. Soon other children were gathered together by Tang Wan. Among these children, the most unhappy one is Chen Chuo. To be honest, he was a little tired of these childish games. But when he saw Tang Wan opening the door and walking in, still dripping with sweat in the not-so-warm weather, he stopped what he was doing. The pen tip stopped on my favorite physics problem, and I just wrote a rare formula on the paper. Then he stood up and followed the gray rabbit in front of him. Chen Chuo stretched out his hand, arranged the hairpins on Tang Wan rabbit's ears into a symmetrical shape, and then withdrew his hand. "This is much more comfortable." Perhaps the unhappy mood I felt just now was due to the irregular hairpin in front of me. Go 11 and Lu Ziyi began to occupy both sides of Tang Wan again, and Li Yu became the peacemaker between them again. Fu Wenzi and Chen Chuo fell silent one after another. Neither of them was talkative. Sujiajia, however, was driven by their harmonious atmosphere. She seemed to be isolated. In the end, Tang Wan stopped and said "Ah" to Sujiajia, who was walking at the end and looked a little disappointed. They reached the last castle, where a powerful devil king was imprisoned. As long as they defeated the demon king, they could save their parents. Tang Wan flicked his ears on his head, lightly stamped his legs, straightened his clothes, and then rushed out first. The middle school boy Lu Ziyi followed closely behind, and the other kids could only accompany them in their madness. The parents took out a deck of playing cards and sat on the top floor of the castle, playing cards boredly. Among them, Toulouse, who has blue eyes and white hair, had notes all over his face, and he was still saying dissatisfiedly, "Lin, do you hate me so much? Aren't we good brothers?" Lulin snorted coldly and threw the two kings out of his hand, Wangjia. Then he opened his hands and said to the other parents, "Don't forget, 1 potato per round. Remember to deliver it to me and Tang Tang's house later." After speaking, he glanced at Toulouse with an impatient look, and said in a cold tone, "When you want to compete with me for candy, we will break off our relationship." "Oh, my dear friend, please don't say that. I have already said that I can give you my brother. Tai-san, I don't want your naughty brother. Yes, I am better at raising cubs than you are. Tell me, your understanding of yourself is so biased that it makes me feel suffocated." 4-4. Papa Fu calmly played a bomb and a straight, and all the cards in his hand disappeared. He pushed up his glasses, interrupting the childish quarrel between the two. He said that several potatoes have said the momentum determined by several 100 million transactions. 4 potatoes, don't forget them. Thanks to Bai Dao Oolong and Chiyo 202210232040546778, the two treasures' monthly votes are so generous. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 57. Laughing to death, the kids below are trying to save the parents, while the parents are playing cards upstairs, and the bet is still potatoes. Either one of them is quite explosive. Ha ha ha, this program might as well be changed to "Dad was abducted by a monster." This name is also quite interesting. I feel like it is the type that I would click on to read. The fat director is a wonderful person, and he very obediently changed the program logo for this section to "Dad was kidnapped by a monster." Look at the logo, Director Fat has really changed it. The fat director has almost become the wish granting of our audience. Whatever he says comes true. Downstairs, as soon as Tang Wan walked in, he felt a strange wind. The weather was very cold, but the fan was still on in the room. The cold wind blew on people's faces again and again, which was a bit unbearable. At this moment, a somewhat awkward Chinese tone came from the ceiling. "You, muds, have to pay homage to the magic fruit. You have to be loyal to the devil to save Dad." Tang Wan looked in the direction of the sound, and what he saw was a little boy wearing a black suit with a pair of devil wings on his back. He was hung from the ceiling, with a pair of white goat horns on his head and a black three-pointed stick in his hand. He looked like a little devil. Perhaps among the children present, except Tang Wan, Sujiajia was a little curious about him. The other cubs ignored him and were looking for supplies instead. The little kid looked at them and ignored him. He was so angry that he waved the weapon in his hand fiercely and yelled, "Hey! Can't you see me?" This was the first time Tang Wan saw this kind of dress. She took out a tablet from her rabbit clothes and wrote on it, "Need help?" The little boy glanced at the gray rabbit, who raised his head, turned his head, and the wings behind him moved, and then said, "No one told me that the rabbits here can talk. I am laughing so hard. Where did this middle school kid come from? How could he have thought of such a ridiculous thing as a rabbit turning into a spirit? Hey, only children will believe in fairy tales about rabbits turning into spirits. It's quite cute. His eyes are so beautiful, they are green, like emeralds. Actually, he is quite white and looks quite cute." Tang Wan realized that he was talking about himself, so he wrote a few more words. "You take us to the head of the family, and we will let you down." The little boy hummed twice and swayed on the ceiling, not afraid of this height at all. He was still saying to Tang Wan, "Little rabbit, come to my place. Ghosts and devils are the best match." His words were mixed with a few German sentences. For Tang Wan, he could only guess. Fu Wenzi on the side understood what he meant immediately. "I want to kidnap Tang Tang." He took Tang Wan's hand and walked to the side, saying, "Don't worry about him, Just let him hang. Sujiajia looked at the little boy hanging above and thought he looked familiar. Those clear green eyes are not seen everywhere. Such beautiful eyes, I must have seen them somewhere. Suddenly, Sujiajia opened her mouth slightly, and the little boy's name came to mind. Andrew Chris. The youngest son of the Chris family, he likes racing and extreme sports. Those green eyes are as affectionate as looking at a dog. And his personality is lively and frivolous, and he has so many exes that he can make several tables. But I can't stand the fact that he is good looking and rich. Sujiajia was a little moved when she thought of this. This is Andrew Chris. Although he is a little younger than himself, he is not unable to accept the relationship between brother and sister. People can be greedy, want it all. However, before Sujiajia took the initiative to talk to Chris, she heard Chris making trouble above. Put me down quickly, I want that rabbit. Chris has never seen such a big rabbit and wants to catch it and take it home. This kind of novelty is his favorite. However, as soon as he said these words, the friend standing next to Tangwan hid Tangwan. Especially the way Lu Ziyi and Go 11 looked at Chris was unkind. Chris was hung up like a little chicken, and even after moving for a long time, he could not untie his restraints. Of course, this is not because the program team deliberately made things difficult for him, but for the sake of Chris' safety. If nothing else, this foreign kid really does have some devilish genes in him. Noisy and full of energy, like a train that never stops, wreaking havoc everywhere. Tangwan still couldn't bear to see a child asking for help in front of him, so he took off his short legs and ran out. Fortunately, the program team is not a crazy person. There is a button directly below Chris. If you press it, Chris will fall down. Chris controlled Tangwan remotely, shouting, "Little rabbit! Press it down for me." Tangwan could only extract the 3 words "press it" from his words, and pressed it without thinking. The program team had no time to stop it. A huge trampoline rose from Tangwan's position. Chris, who was in mid-air, suddenly fell onto the trampoline and jumped as high as he could. Tangwan also followed his movements and bounced twice on the trampoline, his face turned pale. Tangwan had never played on a trampoline before, and the feeling of losing body control made her very uncomfortable. She wanted to crawl to the edge almost instantly. Although this trampoline is large, there are no guardrails on the edge. It is about 1 meter high from the ground. If Tangwan falls off it, she will definitely be injured. Just as Tangwan stretched out one of her arms, someone suddenly grabbed her arms and pulled her down. She felt her heartbeat was beating fast and she was a little scared. The hand that holds oneself is not big, but it is very stable. Fu Wenzi's voice sounded in his ears. It was a little more volatile than usual. He was probably frightened. Very dangerous. Tangwan lowered his head when he heard this. However, Fu Wenzi just put Tangwan on the ground safely, and others gathered around him, including the kid who was still jumping on the trampoline. He also lay on the edge, a little worried. "Are you okay? Is Tang Tang not injured?" Tangwan heard their concerned questions and her hands hidden in her clothes were twisted into knots. She shook her head, and the ears on her head flicked, very cute. Only Sujiajia was not involved. She clearly saw Fu Wenzi hiding his hand, and it looked like he was injured. At this time, everyone is concerned about Tangwan, even Fu Wenzi himself is no exception. She pursed her lips, feeling a little unconvinced. What's so good about Tangwan? How can a mute who cannot speak deserve to be loved by so many people? The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 58. The jealousy in Sujiajia's heart was about to turn into reality, but she knew that she couldn't show it. She has to study hard why these people like Tangwan. The parents who heard the commotion below could no longer sit still. Throwing away the cards in his hand, he hurriedly ran down. Mr. Fu, who walked up to Fu Wenzi, looked at his son's hidden hand, raised his eyebrows, and said nothing. It's just that this time the task is considered completed. They are actually mainly there to get to know the new guests. Chris has been lifted up by his brother with one hand, like a little turtle, shaking his hands and feet constantly, and speaking a long string of words quickly in German. However, Toulouse just reached out and patted Chris's mouth and said, "No swear words are allowed." Chris pouted, a little angry. Just when his eyes fell on Tang Wan, his eyes lit up again. Then he pointed at Tang Wan and said, "Rabbit. Rabbit." Tang Wan hid behind Lu Lin with embarrassment, only looking at Chris with a pair of eyes. Toulouse has always been a person who is extremely passionate about the things he likes. He waved to Tang Wan and said in a singing-like tone, "Hi, Tang Tang, your name is as sweet as you. We meet again." After leaving the dim manor, Tang Wan discovered that it was not that the lights were too dark that night, but that Toulouse's skin was a little dark. With his deep facial features and white hair, he seemed to have a wild and exuberant vitality that was not seen in everyone present. The audience in the live broadcast room naturally also enjoyed this. Handsome guy with black skin, white hair, and blue eyes. Ah, so handsome. He is also wearing earrings. So wild, like a wolf. Woo woo woo, he is bewitching us. Tang Tang, he praises Tang Tang for being sweet. Chris on the side kicked his calf to show his presence, and Toulouse shook his wrist and threw Chris down. Yes, threw it down. Like throwing some small baggage. "This is my brother, Andrew Chris, you can just call him Chris." Chris is smaller than Tang Wan, and his height is also a little shorter than Tang Wan. He raised his head, looked at Tang Wan, suddenly stretched out his arms to hug Tang Wan, then kissed her on the face, and said like a boss, "Ich will see. I want her German." His somewhat wild look suddenly made Lu Lin angry. Lu Lin reached out and pulled Tang Wan out of Chris's arms, then held her in his arms and said to the arrogant brat in front of him, "No." "Why?" Chris tilted his head, a little confused. "I like her, she is so cute, I want to take her home." Lu Lin gritted his teeth, thinking silently not to beat the child, and then said, "This is my family, you can't take it away." Toulouse just laughed from the sidelines and had no intention of stopping it at all. Their family is like this. If they like something or someone, they will take it home. Hide your most precious treasures in a beautiful manner to prevent them from being robbed by outsiders. Lu Lin said to Toulouse angrily, "If you don't hold your brother again, I really won't let you go." When Toulouse heard this, he realized that his good brother was really angry. He no longer stood idly by and hugged this unwilling little cub, not allowing him to harass other people's cubs anymore. But Tang Wan grabbed Lu Lin's hand and took out a tablet from his pocket with writing on it. "Thank you for your like, but I want to be with my brother." Speaking so bluntly, it is really not like Tang Wan, who is usually reserved. Perhaps because he has been with Go 11 for a long time, or perhaps because he was infected by Chris's straightforward emotions, Tang Wan also took the initiative to express his attitude for the first time. Tang Wan then kissed the side of Lu Lin's face, as if telling Chris that this is his brother. No matter how much anger Lu Lin had in his heart, he disappeared, and he was even a little excited. If he hadn't been used to putting on a bad face, his expression would be broken now. When Chris saw Tang Wan rejecting him, his eyes turned red and he stopped talking. Looking languid and listless. Even gave Tang Wan an illusion. It seemed as if the wings behind him were drooping. But Toulouse is not used to it, or that is the education of their family. In wolf education, you have to fight for whatever you want. Seeing that Chris had calmed down, Lu Lin put Tang Wan back on the ground. Go 11 had already prepared a small handkerchief and wiped Tang Wan's face. The expression on his face was quite serious, and he was very guarded against Chris, for fear that he would rush over and give Tang Wan another bite. Ping Ping saw that everyone knew each other, So she walked out of the corner, picked up the potatoes dug out by the parents, and took out the pork kindly given by her grandmothers, and let everyone cook in this castle. Among this group of adults, only Toulouse could cook, and the other adults were all kicked out. However, this time, Tang Wan did not follow him into the kitchen. She followed Fu Wenzi like a quiet little tail. Fu Wenzi felt Tang Wan's presence and stopped with some confusion, turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Tang Wan's eyes fell on Fu Wenzi's hand. He pointed at his wrist and said, "Ah." Fu Wenzi raised his hand and shook it gently. His voice had not lost its childishness, but most of the words he spoke were too calm to be calm. "My hand is fine. Don't worry." However, Tang Wan still kept watching. Fu Wenzi had no choice but to put his hand in front of Tang Wan and said in a gentle tone, "Then you see." Tang Wan stretched out his rabbit paws to lift Fu Wenzi's sleeves and found an obvious red mark on his wrist, as if scratched by something. Tang Wan pursed her lips, took out a bag of disinfectant wipes from her pocket, and carefully placed it on Fu Wenzi's wrist. The disinfectant paper towel should have been cold, but Tang Wan had already warmed it up before it landed on Fu Wenzi's wrist. When it landed on Fu Wenzi's wrist, it was just the right temperature. Tang Wan's rabbit ears drooped, looking very discouraged. Suddenly Fu Wenzi said, "Let me pinch your ears." Tang Wan raised his head and looked at Fu Wenzi in surprise. The expression on Fu Wenzi's face did not change, but his ears quietly turned red. Rabbit ears. Tang Wan turned around and put his rabbit ears in Fu Wenzi's hand. A furry feeling ran across his palm, and Fu Wenzi touched it with his hand cautiously. The hair is very soft and gentle, just like Tang Wan. Tang Wan stood there, not daring to move. After a while, I heard Fu Wenzi say, "Okay, this matter has been revealed. Thanks for the reward from a man who wants to be the king of the sea today. It's the last day of this month." Ah. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 59. Tang Wan turned his head and saw the back of Fu Wenzi's head. He turned his head to one side and looked at the withered flowers and plants around him, but they did not fall on Tang Wan's body. Although Tang Wan felt a little strange in his heart, he did not ask out his doubts. She wanted to go to the kitchen to help, so she turned around, signed to Fu Wenzi, and left this small world. Gray rabbit ears of various colors slipped from Fu Wenzi's palm. The soft touch was like a blooming flower. Her leaving figure seemed to have taken away the only color in this small world. Everything begins to fade and is rendered with ink again. In the end, in this small world, there is only a little flavor that is unique to Tang Wan. Unknown when Father Fu appeared behind Fu Wenzi, watching his always precocious son staring blankly at the gray rabbit not far away, he frowned and asked, "What are you thinking about?" Fu Wenzi didn't look back, just raised his hand and squeezed his palm gently. It's like trying to remember the feeling of the bunny ears just brushing across the palm of your hand. Tang Wan didn't know what happened in the backyard, so she went to the kitchen to help Toulouse. Since people outside know how to cook, it's good that they don't come in and help us. So when Tang Wan went in to help, Toulouse had exaggerated joy on his face. And Chris was also caught by him, processing steamed potatoes and mashing them into mashed potatoes. He pouted his little mouth and murmured something vaguely. It didn't look like he was mashing potatoes, but rather like he was mashing his unreliable brother. It wasn't until he saw Tang Wan coming in that a smile appeared on his face. Tang, fortunately, now Chris knows that Tang Wan is not a rabbit spirit anymore, and has no intention of taking the little rabbit home. It's just that he hurriedly wants to run to Tang Wan's side to avoid her and her. Together they resisted Toulouse. However, Tang Wan just followed Toulouse obediently, picked up the food on the table skillfully, and started cooking. Thinking that there are many people outside and Toulouse hasn't started making staple food yet, Tangwan plans to make a very simple braised beans noodles. There happens to be a piece of pork here too. Chris on the side also wanted to help Tangwan and followed Tangwan like a little follower. His actions immediately made Go 11 and Luzi, who were playing games outside, unhappy. The reason why they stayed outside was because their parents did not allow them to enter the kitchen to have with Tangwan. Why could this foreign kid go into the kitchen and have with Tangwan? The two cubs looked at each other, and then one of them grabbed one of Chris's arms and dragged him outside. While dragging him, he said in his mouth, "Come on, little yellow hair, let's play games together." Chris is a little younger than them. He looks like a little chicken. He is struggling in the direction of Tangwan and still screaming, "Help, help." Luzi reached out and covered Chris's mouth, dragging him to the living room, where all he could hear was Chris's grief-stricken screams. Fu Wenzi just sat with Chenchuo, flipping through bilingual classics in his hands, and did not speak. Only Chenchuo frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "It's really noisy." Li Yu on the side quickly picked up a glass of water and handed it to Chenchuo, saying, "Are you thirsty? Drink water quickly." Yu is really using her life to help Shuashuo avoid being bullied online. Shuashuo's mouth really offends people. But he is also quite cute. Although he has a vicious mouth, he can run very fast when helping people. Speaking cheaply but having a soft heart. These guys are quite soft-hearted. Fu Wenzi stood up and walked to the kitchen, as if ready to help. The other boys saw this, but they didn't react that much. Perhaps in their hearts, Fu Wenzi is measured in everything he does, and they have more trust in him. When Sujiajia saw him going to the kitchen, she got up and prepared to follow him. But he was stopped by Go 11. "Sujiajia, come over and play with us." It is obvious that Go 11 just thought about what his father said, not just playing with one child. Doing so would be invisible isolation, so he called Sujiajia. Sujiajia couldn't help but retract her intention to go to the kitchen and walk towards Go 11. Chris struggled for a long time, and finally had no choice but to participate and play games with them. The kitchen is very lively. Though only Toulouse was speaking. "Wow, Tang Tang, what are you doing? It smells so good, can I have a taste?" Tangwan nodded, picked up a soft potato from the pot, blew on it and put it into Toulouse's mouth. Toulouse accepted Tangwan's feeding and was so excited that he jumped on the ground. "Wow wow wow, this is delicious, very tasty. Tang Tang, you are a genius." Toulouse's compliment was straightforward and sincere, which made Tangwan blush a little. She lowered her head and pulled her hat to hide her blushing face. Fu Wenzi, who was about to walk in, suddenly stopped and walked out again. By the time Toulouse and Tangwan brought out the dinner, everyone's stomachs were making rumbles. Toulouse is a man who hates trouble. Apart from giving the mashed potatoes a flavor, he almost cooked them without adding anything else. Instead, he gave them a bowl and asked them to mix their own condiments and eat with it. But Lulin narrowed his eyes, watched Toulouse pick up the basin-like bowl, and asked, "What are you doing?" Toulouse smiled mysteriously, then came behind Tangwan, opened the braised noodles made by Tangwan, and skillfully picked up a large handful of noodles with chopsticks. He went down with his chopsticks, and half of the braised noodles were lost. Then he ate with big mouthfuls. The movements are wild and bold, as if he has not eaten in several lifetimes. Lulin twitched the corner of his mouth, walked to Tangwan's side, picked up Tangwan with one hand, and picked up the basin with the other hand and returned to his position. Then he served Tangwan some vegetables and noodles, and urged, "Eat quickly, eat them quickly, they will all rob them later." Tangwan sat on the stool obediently, her feet could not touch the ground and could only hang in mid-air, looking a little cute. Her expression was still blank, as if she didn't know why she was eating like this. But he was still very obedient and started eating while holding the bowl. Life is much better now. The food is delicious, without that weird smell that makes people dizzy. It also tastes delicious and won't make you sour when you eat it. Tang Wan took a bite of the potato, and with the tip of his tongue, the soft potato melted into Tang Wan's mouth. She tasted the food in front of her with great piety. Even if she accidentally dropped green onions on the table, she would pick them up with chopsticks and put them in her mouth to eat. While everyone was concentrating on eating, Tang Wan took out a red apple and a round boiled egg from his pocket and put them in Lu Lin's hands. Then he said quietly. A pair of eyes looked around cautiously, fearing that his little move would be discovered. Unknown to everyone, her movements were visible to everyone. It's just that they thought Tang Wan's vigilant look on the little animal was too cute, so they pretended not to see it. But Sujiajia is different. She rolled her eyes and suddenly spoke in a childish tone unique to children. Wan Wan, what is that in your hand? The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 60. Tang Wan subconsciously wanted to take back his hand, but Lu Lin took Tang Wan's hand and held it. The eyes of other people fell on Tang Wan invariably, making her a little embarrassed. But she had taken the apples from the hut, and she had left the eggs for a whole day, carefully protecting them from breaking. She didn't take anything from everyone else, she brought them all from the hut. But she just felt guilty. Because in the orphanage, she never had the understanding of her own things. Everything she owns can be taken away at any time. So the things that are hidden, in a sense, they also belong to the collective. Tang Wan's body became stiff, especially at Sujiajia's words, as if he was not sitting next to Lu Lin, but in front of the long dining table in the orphanage. Their sight is cold, as if it is the darkness in the void, watching and examining themselves. However, the temperature coming from the hands is so real. Tang Wan took a deep breath, and just as he was about to pick up the tablet, he heard Lu Lin beside him say, "What else could it be? Of course it's a small stove for me." Speaking of this, Lu Lin's face showed an expression of wanting to be beaten. The stinky look on his face almost disappeared, and instead he looked like a happy puppy. After all, our Tang Tang family cares about me, unlike you, no one cares about me. Go Yuan originally wanted to retaliate when he heard Lu Lin's strange words. But when I looked at my daughter, I suddenly felt sad. My daughter has never hidden any food for herself. It's really sad. Go 11 looked at her old father with tearful eyes and slowly turned her head to the side, not wanting to admit that this was her father. While reluctantly picking up a piece of noodles from his own bowl, he put it into his bowl. As for other fathers, sons, and brothers, they would not behave like this. Instead, Fu Wenzi took out a melted chocolate from his pocket and placed it in front of Mr. Fu. It can also be considered a kind of filial piety, right? Sujiajia looked at these people helping Tang Wan. She clenched her hands into fists on both sides of her and raised a forced smile on her face. But he was still saying unwillingly, "But these things should be eaten together by everyone, right? We are a collective, how can you keep Tang Tang secretly?" Her expression was innocent, and she didn't seem to realize the malice in her words when she spoke them. Looks like he's just expressing his doubts. The audience in the live broadcast room were also led by Sujiajia's words. They are also echoing Sujiajia's words. Yes, this is something that everyone eats together, how can Tang Wan hide it and leave it exclusively for Brother Lin? She is so thoughtful at such a young age, just like her dean said, she is not a good child. Yeah, she is really a little selfish, hiding things, and being sneaky, her character is really not good. There were more bad words in the barrage, but fortunately, Tang Wan could not see these barrages. Sujiajia's words were mixed with thick evil, like black spreading from all directions, encroaching on Tang Wan's living space bit by bit. even brought a feeling of suffocation. This kind of suffocation made Tangwan feel like he had never left the orphanage. But this time, Tangwan didn't want to tolerate it anymore. She gave in again, and all she got was that everything that belonged to her was taken away. She didn't want Brother Lulin to be criticized even if he stood beside her. She did nothing wrong, she just wanted to be nice to the people she cared about. So under everyone's gaze, Tangwan suddenly stood up. She took out her tablet and wrote and drew on it. The things belong to me and Brother Lulin, and they were the rewards for cooking on the first day when everyone came to me. I just wanted to give it to my brother, so I kept bringing it with me. This is not everyone's thing, it belongs to me and my brother. At the end of writing, Tangwan's hands began to tremble. She is still scared. Because in the orphanage, if you show yourself, you are weird and will be suppressed. Is wrong. In a world that remains unchanged, all outstanding individualities, which are viruses, will be killed. In the past, Tangwan was beaten a lot in order to get his things back. But she was still unwilling to give up just like that. It would be nice if she could talk. If she could speak, wouldn't her things be robbed? Thinking of this, Tangwan stood up straighter, but her hands lost their warmth. The whole person is trying hard to resist the fear in his heart. However, Sujiajia opposite her began to show signs of retreating. She saw that Sujiajia's face became a little embarrassed and her eyes began to wander. Then I heard her say, so, that's it? You could have just said no earlier, which made me misunderstand you. Chen Chuo on the side frowned and said coldly, are we familiar with you? What? Sujiajia asked subconsciously, feeling that the words sounded familiar. Chen Chuo's venomous tongue was steady, why should I tell you if I'm not familiar with you? Normal people wouldn't think that other people's things have to be handed over, right? Don't you think your control is a bit lenient? This sentence is much more lethal than the 3 sentences written by Tangwan. This is simply in public, making Sujiajia unable to step down. Not only did she not let Sujiajia step down, she also raised her foot and kicked away the steps that others were preparing to pass to Sujiajia. Go 11 gave Chen Chuo a thumbs up from the side, thinking that his mouth was really awesome. Li Yu on the side opened his mouth, but stopped talking. Lulin, who was beside Tangwan, looked at Tangwan who stood up again and pushed her back to her seat. Even if he wasn't prepared to be like a child, he couldn't stand Tangwan being targeted repeatedly by Sujiajia. Then he said, yes, our Tang Tang is the most well-behaved child in the world, and we know the best things for our brother. Tangwan's face was red, he lowered his head slightly, nodded, and then pushed the apple in front of Lulin. Sujiajia couldn't bear the grievance anymore. She stood up with red eyes, left the table and ran out directly. Chris, who was heartless on the side, looked at Sujiajia's unmoved face, turned around and asked his big brother, can I eat it? Turuz thought for a while and refused sternly, you can't eat what others leave. Especially someone you don't know well. Guoyuez, who had been pretending to be quiet, stood up directly, apologized to everyone, and went to chase Sujiajia. There is no other way, who told him to fall in love with this kid? Really unlucky. Lu Ziyi pursed his lips, looked at the red apple in front of Lulin with envy, and said sourly. Tang Tang is partial and gives everything to my uncle. He obviously doesn't lack these. Thanks to Lazy 213 and Kanako for their rewards. Thanks to prosperity is not ended, Kanako, Xiaoguliangxian, Tian Tian winner, book friends 202210232040546788, 5 treasures for their monthly votes. February has begun, I wish everyone good luck this month. Love you.